called Meng, or other people pronounce it Mung. I'm gonna go with Meng. It's number 13. I know there's 20 models, so we're a little bit past the halfway point of this line. And World War Toons is a video game, so here's some images from it, but I don't know if people actually still play this game. I never did myself. Alright, so here's a little blurb here. The War Horse, it's the only tank which saw service and combats throughout the whole war, supposedly. I don't know if that's true, though. I don't think this existed at the beginning of the war. I might be wrong. Please leave a comment if you know. Okay, 25 tons. I guess that makes it a medium size. And then a crew of 5, which is typical. And a 7.cm caliber, I guess, of the gun. Alright. Let's take a look here. Oh, it's actually taped together. They're usually not taped together. I probably got this one off eBay, if I recall. And who knows, we'll see if there's some extra packing. Yep, there is. Nope, it's taped even more. So you don't usually get foam inside of these things either. But this seller, you know, wants to make sure there's no warranty, not like broken claim. So a little extra packing, and actually I'll save that for whenever I sell something on eBay. And then we got the typical bag. I kind of like that there's only one bag. Like Gundam model kits, almost every runner's in its own bag because they want to keep them from being scratched up, which I can maybe understand, but maybe with the tank it doesn't matter because it's supposed to look all old and messed up. But this is odd. Look at this. It looks like a bullet shot through this thing. So maybe that is why Bandai bags everything separately, so that sort of stuff doesn't happen. There are water slide decals with number 478. I'm going to just look up the livery of that, although I'm not sure if I'm going to copy that livery, because if it is like this, that's a little bit plain. I was thinking about doing a camouflage myself. Nice rendering. And then we have your typical, you know, list of parts here to check things. And then as long as you can read some numbers and look at some arrows, you can just press fit this thing together. As usual, I would recommend that you don't attach the top to the bottom until you finish putting all the top pieces on. Although some pieces, if you have to paint them, maybe you want to wait until the very end. It's just that this is all friction fit. If you put this top on, well, the top and bottom together, it might be hard to pull apart unless you pry it apart, henceforth damaging the pieces. But again, being a tank, maybe you can consider that war damage. Okay, well, there's the instructions, and then here's the decal recommendations, and then also some recommendations for paints if you want to be specific. But it's only AK interactive paints, it looks like. And I think a collusion. I don't know if that's AK interactive. It does have rubber treads, which I'm not a fan of because the paint doesn't stick to it. But they are molded nicely. Even the little side pins and stuff are visible. And then, yeah, well, actually, this one's got some weird brown or black artifacts in the molding. It's like they didn't clean out the pellets all the way. But it actually, to me, looks like some sort of weathering. So I'm okay with that. And then this is actually odd. Usually there isn't a lot of extra plastic flash on these, but clearly that is. So you might have to go over that with a hobby knife to knock it out or sand it out. So as usual, I'm going to fast forward this thing. You can watch it, you can fast forward it, slow it down, or just skip to the end for the review where I talk about any problems. And we'll see you then. And we're back. So while this is spinning, I read off some Wikipedia. Yes, this actually did run from the very beginning of the war until the very end of the war. It was designed by a company called Krupp in 1936, and they made over 8,500 of these in many variations, letters A through J. So that's a lot of variations and stuff and upgrades throughout the war. And then the chassis itself was used for a lot of other cool armor, in particular the Whirlwind. That would be something really cool to see in cartoon form. All they'd have to do is make a new turret for the thing. It's an anti-aircraft tank. So it was powered by a V12 Maybach engine, as a lot of German tanks were, it seems, making around 300 PS, which gave around a 12 PS per ton power to weight ratio. It had a leaf spring suspension. And I guess that's all I cared to learn. There's a lot about this tank because it was the most popular, not the most popular, the most numerously produced German tank of the war. Okay, so let me back out here a little bit now and show you some images. So with 8,500 tanks, there's a lot of different camo patterns. So I just made up my own. But here's some real images, right? I think what happened in the war is they just basically gave these crews a tank, and they just said, hey, paint it yourself. You know, maybe get some paint, find some paint, and camouflage the thing yourself, because we don't have time to be doing this for you. That's what I'm guessing, but I obviously didn't live during the war, thankfully. What a horrible situation. So there are many of these didn't have these side armor plates, but I managed to pull these up. And then this is an existing tank that has like a mesh screen. I don't know the story behind that, if that actually was real in the war, or if they just did that because it was cheaper than buying, you know, a plate steel. This one has Zimmerit on it, anti-sticky mine coating. You'll notice the exhaust is actually painted here, so I didn't choose to rust out my exhaust canister as some other people do. Okay, so let's get into the build and the features of this model. Let me stop that because it's distracting, right? Spinning it around. In fact, let me close out these windows because you've got time to see them now. Well, starting from the top, one thing that I noticed, these two hatch doors were very, very loose. They literally just fell out on their own a couple times. So after that happened, I ended up gluing them together at the seam. It's such a small opening that you're not going to get, well, I don't think you'd get a good character in there. So I glued it together. Let's see, so as far as the fitment of parts, there were a few issues of tightness, no issues of looseness. Let me think though. Oh, and this one. This particular headlight, the peg was very tight, so I had to scrape away a bunch of the plastic to get it in there. And we're talking before I painted it. I put the whole thing together before I painted it. Okay, so there's only three articulations. The first is the barrel itself. This actually has probably the widest range of movement, or that I can recall, recent in these Meng model tanks for the World War II series at least. So a lot of up and down movement there. And then all the Meng tanks, the turret will spin, and in this case the keyway's off at like a 45-degree angle. The tracks will spin, same with the wheels, but all that paint and dust will chip off, so I'm not gonna rotate it for you guys. For me, it's a static model. It's supposed to look good. I'm not here to play with my model kits. So, but if you want to give this to a kid, you can be rest assured they could roll it along a carpet or something like that. Okay. So let's see if there's anything else that was really tight. The hull fitment was very easy, actually. These parts were easy to put in. The wheels were fine, although you might want to use a tool to press in the axles. This is nice and snug. So yeah, all these parts down here were pretty good. This is so tight, but not super tight, that you can just push it in and it won't fall out. But I tried to use this limonene glue, just to let you know on a random note. To me, a limonene cement, because this is based off of oranges or citrus, so the smell isn't so bad. It's not as toxic as the regular stuff, which is your traditional Tamiya cement. But it seems like the plastic that Meng used on this particular kit, or maybe all of the World War Toons kits, doesn't react very well with this limonene stuff. Because I did use a bunch of it to mount these points on, but then later, like hours later, I just pulled it off easily. So it didn't actually melt the plastic to fuse it together like this stuff would. I bring that up because putting this turret together, this plate here is sandwiched by the top and the bottom. And there's a big gap here. And so I tried with a bunch of limonene and it just never bonded. But with the Tamiya cement, the regular stuff, I used some clamps and it bonded. So if you want to save some time, wear a respirator or a well-ventilated room and just use regular cement, not the more sustainable, healthy choice. Alright, so just my feedback on using glues there. This fell off because I used the wrong cement, but putting it in was fine enough. This little back storage cabin here, probably for ammunition. There's a top piece and a bottom piece, and if you press it up too far against the back end here, it slides in this way, it will make the top piece want to come off. So I learned to just glue the top piece to the bottom piece, let that set, and then when it was done, or actually, you know what, I just released the tension, I just glued it right here, right onto the turret. So now this is flatter, so you'll find out if you should build this kit. Okay, so I think that was all the problems, really. Again, the worst probability would be the hull fitment, but the hull fitment was actually quite good. Not much gappiness, maybe a little cement here in this piece, but yeah, very nice. And then if you wanted to, you can remove these to take the armored look away, this whole frame, or just the armor plates. If you slide it upwards, it'll come off of these carrier pieces, but you'll just have a frame there, so that'll look kind of weird also. As far as the weathering of this, I did the hairspray salt chip method. So the first thing I did is I sprayed everything with a Vallejo black primer, so it will stick to the plastic. After the primer, I sprayed it with hairspray, and then I sprinkled salt on it. And then I painted a little yellow and this light tan, and then I hairsprayed it again, salted it, and then I painted the green and then the brown on top of that. So basically all these little black marks are where the salt used to be. I chipped the salt off, and now I can see the black underneath it. So that's real chipping, like in the real world, how paint chips off. I prefer that method instead of using a bunch of paint brushes which layers on top of it. But in reality, a chip is really removing paint, right? So that's why I do it that way. And then I used a whole bunch of Mr. Hobby sand kind of texture of 3 different colors first the darkest one and then working my way up to the lightest, like sand color. So you can see a bunch of it there. I like that stuff because it has texture, you know. So this looks like, you know, caked on mud. So it's very effective, that Mr. Hobby stuff. And then another thing that I used was AK Interactive Rust, and it streaks very well. So it looks also very rusty because inside that there's some sort of powder, and it gives it a little bit of dimensionality, like rust caking. So although it gets knocked off by the clear coat, it knocks it down a little bit. For the best effect, you probably don't want to clear coat over that stuff. And then another thing I also used is AK Interactive Streaking Grime. So that's these black streaks here. And that stuff works fantastic also. You just put a little dab on, and then you take a different paintbrush and you just drag it down. And it looks like, you know, some sort of weathered, you know, rust residue or some sort of grease residue. So I put a bunch around the exhaust, thinking it'd be like a greasy exhaust, you know, spewing out diesel fumes or whatever they ran. Actually, I think the Maybach engine was a petrol-powered engine. Okay, so I rushed through this job, and so I probably did this whole model in like 6 hours. And so I didn't let the hairspray dry between the painting, so the chipping was very easy to do. I could just smear it off with my fingers. Actually, when I was doing this decal here, the decal adhesive, you know, worked through the paint very easily, so you can see a lot of the black primer underneath. But it's fine because you just go over it and do some paint washes of the rust or whatever to cover all that up. So that's it. It's yeah, I think it turned out alright for me. I didn't bother cleaning out my airbrush, so I have very wide camo lines. So, and also the PSI maybe at 25 or 20 at least, so it wasn't doing fine lines. I'd have to clean out my airbrush to get a really fine spray, but I just wanted to get through this project. I don't really love this tank, you know. For some reason it just doesn't appeal to me. It should, because it's got all this extra armor on it, but for some reason I just don't like the appearance of the Panzer IV so much. Which leads to some other tank comparisons. So the Panzer III, which I did recently, I like the appearance of the Panzer III more because it has the truncated, shorter, like howitzer style barrel on it. Whereas this, I don't know, I don't like the long barrel on this for some reason. Or maybe it's just too thin, you know, it doesn't look comical enough. It almost looks like a realistic barrel on a cartooned body, and so it looks a bit odd to me. But this is being so stubby, I just prefer the look of this. Yeah, these are both medium tanks, so I guess this being the Panzer III was the predecessor. This has a seam line here, though. This seems like a better engineered model kit compared to this one. Alright, so with the side skirts, they look quite big. Both of these would have been shooting at the Sherman tank, but the Sherman tank was grossly undersized by Meng. It's cute and all, it looks really cartoony and cool, but it just doesn't scale properly. I believe the Sherman tanks even weighed more than both of these. The Shermans are like 35 tons if I recall, whereas these are like 25 tons. So you can just see something's wrong there, right? But if you're really into these cartoon tanks, there's a company called Tiger Model, and they released a cartoon Sherman. So I ordered it, and eventually I'll get around to it, and it'll probably be better than this. But we'll also have to see. Hopefully it's scaled to fit this line of products and not its own thing. A couple other tanks they would have been shooting at would be the French Samoa tank. This thing's pretty funky with this horizontal camouflage that they're using, the French there. And it was the Sherman. It just doesn't look right in this setup. And another Allied tank is this British Matilda 2, I think it is. And it was copying like the naval warships of World War I with this like block pattern. Okay, so that's got built-in skirts, quite interesting, and a whole lot of wheels down there. So these are all supposed to be medium tanks, and I suppose they might be scaled to correctly. You gotta ignore the side skirts. So the German tanks are wider. It's interesting that actually this Panzer IV, the fenders and the tracks are much narrower than this Panzer III. I don't know. I don't memorize the dimensions of these things. So I don't know if that is accurate to the real tanks, that the Panzer IV is smaller than the Panzer III. Well, anyways, I think they're all fitting better than the Sherman, at least. So, yeah, if you want to make like a cartoon diorama, you can. And speaking of which, here's my little coaster. If you're curious, this coaster, by the way, is just a piece of round acrylic you can buy. I bought mine off AliExpress. And then I just put a bunch of glue down, and these are probably pepper spices. Pepper and other paprika and stuff like that. And spices are cheap. Well, I guess if you buy spices in bulk, it's a cheap way to add texture to stuff. And some hobby trees and hobby grass. And then this is a Yufan figure. And there's a different video on me doing those if you want to look up Y-U-F-A-N. So let's get a low angle here. As is usual with these World War Toons tanks, they're very fun. I like the design of them. I like the cartoon nature of them. I used to build realistic tanks when I was a kid, so I have no desire to really make realistic model kits anymore. I've been there and done that. And the nice thing about not making realistic model kits is you don't have to spend time trying to make them realistic, right? But when it's a cartoon, you know, I was pretty carefree about the camo and the rusting and all that stuff. If it doesn't look right, who cares? It's a cartoon tank, or at least that's how I think about it. Okay, well, one last feature, if it should be of interest to you, is these two little gas tanks here on the side. They're removable. They don't peg in. They're just sitting there by gravity. I put some poster putty in there to mount those so they don't get lost. So if you like, you know, simple model kits and you don't want to have to spend weeks on end as some other YouTubers do when they're modeling realistic looking kits, this is a great way to do it. And I think the end result is still pretty neat. The kits themselves are well engineered. Meng does a good job, you know, with the parts fitment. There's not much prep involved compared to some Western branded old school model kits. Thank you for watching. I'll see you the next time we do a World War Toons.